So here we are with Richard Hull, Director of Confident Communication. Richard has worked with VBL both as a communications coach with us as a team, but also with our clients to improve their communication and public speaking. And we're going to have a little chat today, Richard, about networking and how people who go networking can improve their communications with the people that they meet. Particularly, maybe we could think about people who are a little bit nervous. We've talked a lot about people who are introverts not enjoying networking and not perhaps standing in the corner and being a little quiet. So as a communications expert, if I was a nervous networker, what would be the sort of advice that you would give me?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I loathe networking. I've been into various networking situations in the past, and some of them were fairly low-key. Some of them were a little bit more prestigious at places like the House of Lords or the headquarters of the Sunday Times. And I genuinely feel nervous before going into these events because I don't know anyone. And I think nerves are good. Nerves show that you care. Nerves show that you want to make a good impression. Nerves show that you want to get it right. And I'm an introvert myself. I live in the middle of nowhere and I have very few interactions with society apart from those that I can't really avoid. But the thing is, and the reason I do what I do, is I hate it when this idea of being introverted, being nervous, holds you back. Because networking is incredibly useful, because fundamentally it comes down to the fact that people do business with other people. And I'm a great believer in that. And I don't just mean business transactions. I mean everything in life in terms of meeting friends, meeting someone that you end up spending the rest of your life with. This is all down to communication. Communication is key. And whilst we have all these wonderful computers and online things and all those wonderful attractions, at the end of the day, people do business with people. So these networking events, they're key because you go out in danger of doing business. That's how I see it. You go out in danger of meeting someone who you might connect with, and it might lead to something in the future. And that could be 6 months down the line, 3 years down the line. And I think one of the things about it is this fear of judgment. We don't like being judged, do we, as human beings? We
No.
quite like it if other people like us. And with a networking event, you are deliberately going outside your comfort zone and putting yourself into a situation where you are going to be judged by other people. I'm afraid it's inevitable. It's the way it goes. And I think the first piece of advice I would give anyone in these situations is just quite simply accept that not everybody's going to like you, because that's the way of the world. We don't like everybody that we meet, and not everybody who meets us is going to like us. And I've come to accept that over the years, and it does make me a considerably happier and less nervous person, because I just accept that that is the way things are. So my first piece of advice would be to accept that you're not going to always get on with everybody.
And when you go to a network, you've got a room full of people that maybe never met any of them before. Have you got a rehearsed opening line that if you just walked up to someone and you never met them, they'd never met you, you stick out your hand? Is there something that you would rehearse to say, or do you freestyle? How would you go about that?
Well, I would never over rehearse anything because it sounds forced. What I tend to do is I use humour as a bit of an icebreaker. Now, I don't mean I go and start cracking jokes and being the irritating, overwhelming person in the room. But I usually ask a question such as, so what do you do when you're avoiding meeting other people? Or something along those lines, just to break the ice. So what do you do when you're not attending one of these appalling networking events? So what do you do when you're trying to avoid making contact with other people? It's that kind of thing, because the point is as well, and this I suppose would be my second piece of advice, most of the people in the room feel exactly the same as you.
Yeah.
They feel this nervousness of having to talk to people. I remember attending an event in London. I can't even remember what it was for, but it was quite high profile, and there were lots of very busy and very important people there. And I saw a well-known former MP who shall remain nameless, but he presents ITV's Good Morning Britain or whatever it is. And I
Yeah.
saw him there and I thought, I'd like to meet you. So I walked over to him and just said, gosh, you're much taller in real life than you are on television. Nice to meet you. And we had a good old chat.
Yeah.
And I think that little bit of humour and accepting that everyone in the room feels the same as you is a good way to start, because it's almost a little bit self-deprecating. We're showing through that little bit of humour and that self-deprecating humour, we're showing that we're human and that we're just a person like everybody else, whether we are a well-known MP or a lord
Yeah.
or other.
I think there's a natural assumption when you walk into a room and you're introduced to someone like an MP that they're much better at this than you are, but they're probably not, are they?
No, I think everybody feels the same. I went to an event at the House of Lords, and the Lord who'd invited me, I introduced him and said, "Oh, good afternoon, Lord so and so." And he said, "Oh, call me Paul." And
Hmm.
immediately you realize, oh, this is just another person. We're all people. And I think that is part of the problem we have in life. We have a society that's driven to a degree by celebrity.
Hmm.
Now, I spent years working in the theatre, so I've worked with people who would be seen as celebrities. And trust me, they're just people. They're just
Hmm.
people doing a job. And I think we worry when we walk into these situations that there are celebrities within our industry there, whether it is the world of the theatre or education or business, and that we feel under pressure to make a really good impression. Well, I think you've just got to be yourself.
Yeah.
There's no point trying to be something you're not, because you'd have to sustain it for the rest of your life.
I remember I was on the General Electric Management Development course, which was a 3-week course, and you met all of the top executives who were held in godlike status
Mm.
by people at General Electric. And we had these people to help prepare us for meeting these people. They're really good on the course. And Jeff Immelt was flying in a helicopter for us all to meet. And I remember saying to the person that was looking after, I said, "Oh, well, what's he like?" He said, "Well, he's very busy and important, but he still puts his trousers on one leg at a time," which I thought was a great piece to level it, because you look at them
Yeah.
more as a human being than this sort of godlike status.
Yeah, I think that's something that people, I don't think people actually like this godlike status. I remember a situation where I was in a room full of people, and it was a project, and the chief funder was there. So this was a multi-millionaire funder. I didn't have a clue who he was,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know what he looked like. And we all sat down, and he said that he'd heard about me from something I'd said in a previous meeting. It had stuck, and they'd reported it back to him. And he said to me, "I'll remember you."
Hmm.
And I said, "You're sharper than you look. You should remember me." And the people either side of him sort of went, "Oh, I can't believe you just said that." Whereas he looked at me, smiled, and winked. He liked it. He liked the fact that I wasn't sort of kowtowing,
Yeah.
and I was just being me and being honest and being genuine. And I think the sooner people accept, as you've just mentioned with the chap with his trousers, we're all just people. We're all just
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely.
Um, and we probably all feel the same. We all feel a little bit nervous and a little bit of humour and a little bit of self-deprecating. I'm a little bit nervous to be here, so I suppose I better talk to you. Is that all right? We're supposed to talk to each other, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Is enough to break the ice and get the conversation going.
Yeah. When you answer questions from people, because quite often when you meet lords and particularly they're very curious
Mm,
individuals quite all the
mm.
time. Like, and they'll ask you a question. How would you go about if someone says you, "What do you think of the Labour government?" How do you go about answering that sort of a question?
Well, I think it's important to be honest, to be
Mm.
yourself, but also to say what you think,
Hmm.
because there's no point saying what you hope they want to hear you say, because at the end of the day, that's not you and that's not honesty. I mean, with people that I work with, when we talk about discussing opinions, I tell them that they need to tweet.
Okay.
And they say, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, this social media that's called Twitbook or something like
Yeah.
that. People are constantly expressing opinions on it. That's what it is. If you actually look at it and read it through, it's opinion, 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 opinion. And I say, what do you need? What do you need to do is tweet. And they say, what do you mean? And I said, well, think of the word tweet. It starts with a T. Kick off. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. That's my T, think. Tell me what you think. And it's a bullet point. It is a straightforward, simple sentence that says what you think. Okay, so we've done the T of tweet. Now tell me why. Why do you think this? Give me some reasons why you think this. Okay, good. I'm starting to get it now. So tell us what you think. Tell us why you think it. Okay, can you give me some examples that support that? Maybe a personal anecdote, something that's happened to you, something you've read on the interweb net or watched on the YouTube, for example. Some facts or statistics that just support what you think and why you think it. And then I suggest that they expand and they say, what do you mean? Do you want to add more, add more? And I said, no, no, no. Consider the counter argument. Think of an opinion. When you've got your opinion, try and think about the argument, the subject, the topic holistically, and expand upon it by showing that you've considered the other side of the argument. So my second E of tweet is expand, which is consider the counter argument. Other people might think, but I don't agree because. Show you've thought about the whole thing. And then, to make sure you leave a nice parting shot, as it were, with your opinion, just remind people, and that's what I think. So you're almost repeating your introduction in your conclusion. And so I advise people to tweet. Tell me what you think. Why do you think it? Examples that support it. Expand on it. Show me you've thought about the counter argument. And then remind me again before we go off and find someone else to network with that's far more interesting than me, what you think again. So I actually use that when I'm working with people to get them to express their opinions. I find it's very, very useful in education, in schools, when I'm working with young people, both in terms of oracy and speaking and confidence. They've all got opinions. If you ask a room full of 14-year-olds, what do you think about homework? They've got an opinion on it. They'll start to talk to you about it. When you talk about, they're talking about banning social media for under 16s. What do you think about that? They'll talk about it. But I use it in written work as well. I remember setting an essay question about King Lear to some sixth form students. And effectively, they just retold the story of King Lear, but in written form in their own words. I said, well, I don't want that. Shakespeare wrote it far better than you did. I want you to tell me what you think. That's what I want in the written word. So the tweet structure that I use is fantastic for those situations where you've got to express your opinion in a detailed way, but it's also very useful in your written work when you're trying to actually put out a plan and explain what you think in a sort of, I see the tweet really as a bit of a skeleton. You can then add the flesh to it. But as a starting point, when you're walking into these situations and you're worried, what are they going to ask me? What if they ask me my opinion about this? It's quite a handy little skeleton to hang an answer off and then add some flesh to as you see fit.
And you've obviously used that model before. And what sort of range of responses have you experienced at networking when you've used it? I mean, what would you do if someone said, well, I completely disagree with you, and then stops talking?
I'd ask why. Yeah. I'd ask why. I mean, I'm a great believer that when you're building relationships with people, you should ask a lot of questions. I'm not talking about bombarding them, but in those situations, so for example, and listen, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listening's twice as important. In that, if someone said, well, I completely disagree with you, I'd say, fantastic. Differences of opinions. Differences of opinion is what makes the world go round. So I would say, okay, so why do you think that? I'm fascinated. Tell me why. And I would listen in that when someone's talking to me, I'm really listening to understand why they're saying what they're saying. And in the same way, if I'm using my tweet structure to express an opinion and they interrupt me, I'll listen to them. And I'm a great believer that in terms of building relationships, if you listen to people, if you question them, and your questioning is genuine, you want to find out about people because people are interesting. And because we human beings are inherently nosy, we like hearing about other people. And so even if I'm interrupted, I would then listen to why they've interrupted me and try to understand why they're saying what they're saying so that we can then have an actual discussion and not a debate as such about it, but you can have a conversation and be prepared to have your opinion and your mind changed.
And what I can hear you saying there almost is that your curiosity turns the tweet in reverse. So, tell me what you think. Why do you think that? So you can use it almost in reverse as a line of questioning.
Oh, definitely.
To the person, yeah.
But I think curiosity is a great thing. I think
Mm,
curiosity is something that it's not that we lack. We're just, because we live in a world where we're frightened of talking to other people, the fear of speaking in front of other people is often seen as one of the major fears of mankind.
yeah,
We worry about being curious because we worry about where that conversation will go. But I think curiosity is a great icebreaker. And I have to say, the number of people I work with, when I'm working with a room full of people and I say, "Hello, how are you?" They look at me like I'm from another planet because I'm being curious. And
yeah,
did you have a good weekend? And all those sort of icebreaker questions. It's all about building a relationship. It comes back to people doing business with people, but it's about building a relationship. And you build relationships through listening to people, asking the right questions, being curious, being you, and expressing your opinions in a genuine way. And the tweet structure that I share with people just helps people to have a skeleton to hang these things off if they do want to be a little bit more prepared with their answers and just think them through before they walk in to the lion's den, as it were.
yeah. And since lockdown, obviously, we live in this sort of hybrid world, and you and I are talking on Teams now. Is there any differences or any advice you give to people? Because there are online networking events, which obviously are much, or I find much more difficult because I'm naturally a person that likes to shake people by the hand. You can tell a lot from people's body language. You don't get that in an online environment, but lots of people have to operate in that environment. Is there anything that you could offer, say, in an online environment you would do differently?
I would say I'm similar to you in that I use the online environment because I opt to live in West Wales, 2.5 hours from any possible civilization. So
Mm,
I use online quite a bit. I think you can still pick up a huge amount from people's body language. The first thing I'd say is when you're on a call and there are various people on the call, be aware that someone's always watching you. Now, perhaps I shouldn't admit this, but I attended a course the other day
mm,
which is designed for naughty people who break the speed limit slightly by accident, of
of
course.
course, of course.
And there were about 11 people on this course, and it was really interesting. It was fascinating. But you can see just from the people's sort of headshots, as it were, you can see who's focused and who's listening and who's actually kind of, oh, I can't wait till I get this over. I know I can't fail. And you can still see that from the body language that you pick up from people. The other thing is with online networking, we're frightened of technology, but technology is great. I think it's brilliant and connects loads of people. And we only have to look at how it helped us during the pandemic to see people we love. And when we couldn't see them in person, I think it's brilliant. The other thing is always put yourself forward would be my advice. Always raise your hand physically or through the raise hand button.
Yep.
And when you go out into breakout rooms, because that happens sometimes, you get put into a breakout room. The same thing applies. I've been put into breakout rooms and I'd say, well, I suppose someone has to speak first. It'll be me. Hello, I'm Richard.
Yep.
And I try and break the ice and use that little bit of humor in exactly the same way.
Mm,
Just because I can't shake their hand and look them in the eye quite so much. And there are other things about technology. One is, and I'm trying to do it today, I'm trying to look at the camera rather than you, which I
yeah.
find very disconcerting,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure that my eye line looks like I'm looking at you, even though I'm not. So I always say camera, not screen. And then I would also say you can use technology to your advantage in that if you think about what you can see of me now, you can't see what's on the other side of my screen. Now, I
Mm,
haven't got endless notes about our discussion because I don't know what we're going to be talking about, and it's just a
yeah.
conversation. But one could, for example, put post-it notes round the back of my screen. You wouldn't be able to see that. With any perhaps important questions, I want to make sure that I don't miss out, or a certain point that I feel I really want to make in this arena. And so one can use technology to your advantage in that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. What else? Anything else that you think we should cover in terms of when networking and
Don't be frightened of having a cup of coffee on camera.
no, absolutely.
I think that's very
I
important.
think mine's empty, but
Oh, excellent. Um, I think we just have to accept that the way business works and the way the world works is all through connections with other people. You can have as much technology as you like. You can have as many emails going to and fro as you like, but they don't substitute for face to face and for communication and looking people in the eye and shaking their hand and being yourself and talking with pride about what you do. I mean, for example, I don't do any marketing for confident communication at all,
No.
because I am a great believer that the best recommendation you can have is someone talking to someone else and saying, oh, we had this chap Richard come in and do this and blah 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 blah. Because me sending generic emails to people, I just feel it's a bit cold cally, it's a little bit, and in the early days when I started the business, I was thinking about how best to do my marketing. And I found being invited to events. So I knew a few people and I said, oh, I'm doing this now. They said, oh, could you come and judge this debating competition? Yes, no problem. I'll come and do that. That sounds rather fun. So I go and judge a debating competition. At the debating competition, I meet 3 other people involved in this network. And they say, oh, could you, oh, Richard, have you ever done this before? And it just sort of grows. Now, that's not me being disrespectful of marketing and media and all that. I think it's great. But I think that we can have an over-reliance upon it and think, oh, well, if I've sent that email, then I've done that.
Yeah.
But actually, it all comes back to the fact that communication is the key. And the world we live in, networking is an important part of it. And I think as well, you never know, as I said, you're in danger of going out and doing some business, but you never know who you might meet, who might be able to help you, not just as someone who's going to spend money with you or be a customer or those sort of things. But I've met people who I've helped and they've then helped me, but there's never actually been any business transactions, or I've advised, oh, maybe you want to have a look at this. I've seen this going, or have you thought about this? And when people say, can you recommend anyone for this? You never know where all these networks and connections might lead to one day. So my dad ran a business for 30 odd years within agriculture, and he used to go around visiting farms all the time. And he said, you go out in danger of taking an order.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely spot on. He said, you go out, you have a chat, it might lead to something, it might not. It doesn't matter. But what have you got to lose? And the answer is nothing.
Nothing, no. If I can come back to one of your earlier points about the immediacy of your communication in a face-to-face environment. And I can't remember where I read it, but somebody said that the measurement of the effectiveness of a communication is in the actions that are taken, which reminds me sometimes of when I'm asked to take the bins out and I'm actually in the garden, but because somebody has said it, you must have heard it. And it comes back to your point about sending emails out into the ether, hoping that somebody thinks. And I think one of the great things about networking is you can say something and you can tell immediately, say, do you understand what I've just said? Has my message landed? And if it's clear that it hasn't landed, you can reinforce it, or you can do it in a different way. And I think that's one of the great things about sort of making yourself understood is that you get several goes at it in a face-to-face environment, whereas in an email communication or something similar, you only get one go, and that if it doesn't land, you don't know.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's a bit like if you're running an online event and you say, has anyone got any questions? The answer is invariably no, because people want to finish and move on and go and have a cup of tea. But the point is you do get those attempts to clarify, and you do get, and sometimes they come because you're reading someone's body language. You can see they're looking a little bit confused by what you say. So you automatically have another go at clarifying. But the thing I would add as well about this, because I feel I've been very negative about marketing, and I'm really not. Being part of a network, I think, is a great thing, in that I'm part of the VBL LinkedIn network, and I feel part of something there. And so I get notifications through LinkedIn that something's been posted. And I go, oh, well, that's jolly good. I'll have a look at that when I've got time, and I'll watch that. And it's part of something, being part of something. part of a network, your network, joining other networks. I think that's kind of important because human beings, we we must have purpose. We like to feel connected to other people. We like to feel part of something. And I've been part of networks that have been a complete waste of time and have purely been for the organizer of the network to promote themselves shamelessly.
Yeah.
But I've also been part of networks that are really strong, where people genuinely are looking to help each other. And that's the kind of networks we want to be part of. And but in order to be part of those networks, we've got to go out and put ourselves
You got to
outside
go.
our comfort zone in what
Yeah.
I call the pit of misery, where we've got to fight, where we learn, and where we put ourselves out of our comfort zone. And because we often think, oh, I could do that, or I could just stay at home, or I could avoid doing that. But actually, it's when we put ourselves in those situations that are outside of our comfort zone, like a networking meeting, that's where we learn. We learn how to be better at network meetings next time. We think, oh, I said that to that person and they weren't impressed. Okay, maybe don't say that again.
Yeah.
That's where we actually learn how to do it, is by doing it. And so we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone and try these things, because networking is a skill. In the
Yeah.
same way that driving a car is a skill, you can't turn that networking skill on in the same way you don't jump into the driver's seat on your 17th birthday and shout, I'm off my test, whoop, whoop. You
Yeah.
practice and you make mistakes and you keep going because you want the independence of having a car. With networking, sometimes we don't see that end goal, that end product, that having my driving license. And so we avoid it. But actually, by doing it, we practice it. I don't believe practice makes perfect at all. I think that's drivel. I think practice makes us better at doing things, and practice makes it easier to do these things. It's not an
Yeah.
idea of perfection. So by stepping out of our comfort zone and doing them, we're developing our own skills as well as going out in danger of doing business.
And I don't want to turn this conversation into one about feedback, but
Mm,
quite often you don't know, you become this unconscious competent, as we say, when you know how to do
mm,
something. And sometimes it needs someone to look at you from a third party to say you're really good at this, because you just go and do it. And I think there's people, and you will have experience of people who act incredibly well,
mm,
and people look at them and go, "How do you do that?" You really,
mm.
and for them, it's just like it's their job. They just go on the stage and they become another person for half an hour, and they stop being another person. And it's absolutely fantastic to observe, but they probably don't. It probably doesn't feel like them
No,
being magical to them.
I think you're absolutely
Mm,
right. And I mean, when I started uh, working with adults within this field of communication, I was very, very nervous about it. I felt very, very nervous because I've been a theatre director for 10 years, and I got to the point that I could turn up at rehearsals having not read a script, and I could just work with it on my feet live, and
mm,
it was quite something. Whereas with this, I was totally out of my comfort zone because I'd never done it before. And for the first few attempts, everyone was saying, that was wonderful, marvelous. And I'm going, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about
mm.
this. And the nerves were so bad for me that I had to think, okay, I can't keep doing this. It's driving me insane. What can I do to give me the confidence to do this? And one day the answer was very clear, which was, unfortunately, this has never happened. But if I ran a workshop and someone came up to me at the end, the person who'd arranged it, for example, and said to me, Richard, that wasn't really what we were after. We weren't quite happy with that. My response would be, well, this is not a problem. You won't be charged for it. Now, just having that in my head, it all clicked. And I went, okay, I can now go out and do this. And I relaxed and I
Mm.
got better at doing it because I didn't worry about it so much. And I think it's that worry that prevents. And the feedback we get from others is great. It is great. But you're right. It's that imposter syndrome, isn't it? We never actually believe that we can do these things. I do webinars for an unnamed education union. And I remember the first one I did, I sent across the PowerPoint and they came back to me and said, oh, on the front page, it says microphones off, cameras off. It's a webinar. And I said,
Mm.
okay, pardon my ignorance. What does that mean? And they said, well, you can't see anyone and they can't talk to you. And I said, what, you mean I've got to talk for an hour and there's no to and fro? And they said, yeah. And I was like, okay. So I was really nervous about it. And then I did it. And it was, I suppose, like an actor being on stage. You're talking to the darkness.
Like a monologue.
Yeah, it's like a monologue.
Yeah.
And I thought after I'd done one, I just did it like this and talking to the camera and all this, that, and the other. They said, oh, can you do another one? I said, yes, what on? And this is now 5 years down the line. I'm still being asked. And I think I must be doing something right for them to keep asking me to do these things. And I suppose a little bit of confidence comes from that. Now, if I saw that as being outside of my comfort zone, like a networking event. And I went, well, I've never done it before. So what's the worst that can happen? I'll try it, see how it goes. And again, it's about putting yourself out there and just trying these things.
Absolutely.
I'm boring myself now.
No, Richard, no, that's been really useful. Some really useful insights into how, as a communication specialist, we can network better. It's been really useful for me to listen to. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure. My pleasure.